Hi, my name is Felicia Cox, and this is my final project for the Mobile Applications and Web Design course with etechtraining.com. My project is about focuses on electrical calculations, which would be relevant to electricians and engineers. The objective here is to allow us to make on-the-fly changes to our designs. So here we see that the scope of the project is limited to calculations for 600-volt circuits, and that it's based on the National Fire Protection Association's NEC standard, which is the standard used in Barbados. And that's the reason for the 246 designation, which is Barbados's area code. We can see the navigation across the bottom, main for the main page, Conduit to look at calculations related to Conduit, cable for calculations related to cable, about to learn more about the app or the developer, contact to send feedback, or help if you have questions about the app. So now let's jump into Conduit. Here we have the option of two different calculations. We can either decide to figure out what's the maximum fill for a conduit, or we can find the maximum number of conductors that a conduit should carry. So first let's click on maximum conduit fill. Here we have the opportunity to select our conduit and to select the number of wires that we want to put in the conduit. The reason that this is important is that the NEC has a different fill percentage depending on the number of wires. So if what we want is we want to have 2 wires in the conduit only, then we can just select 2. Maybe we don't want a 1-inch conduit, maybe we want a 3/4 inch conduit, or in Barbados we would say a 20mm conduit. And then we can click calculate. That brings up the results table, which tells us that for a 3/4 inch conduit, the maximum area that you can fill is 0.157 square inches. That will allow us to figure out, for example, well, how much extra space are we leaving for any future circuits in here? Maybe we might want to choose a bigger conduit so that if we need to install more cables later, that we don't have to try to run another conduit. We can reset to the defaults using the reset button. And if we choose to remove the number of wires, we're going to get an error message letting us know that the number of wires has to be a numeric value and at minimum has to be 1. This type of error message will also turn up if we try to put in a non-numeric value. So the program doesn't let the calculation proceed unless there is a numeric value in this field. There's a special case here where the number of wires is 3. If you're familiar with the NEC, you may know this. And in this particular case, you may or may not want to calculate something called the jam ratio, which will give us an idea whether or not these cables might get stuck in the conduit. So if we want to calculate the jam ratio, we now have to enter what the cable diameter is, and we have the option of inches or we have the option of millimeters. We can also increase or decrease that value, but regardless, we can hit calculate, and that will tell us what the jam ratio is. If the jam ratio were the problem value, here you can see the jam ratio is increasing because we've chosen a smaller cable diameter. So in this particular case, our jam ratio is okay. The problem comes when we're looking at a jam ratio of between 2.8 and 3.2. And when it's in that range, it tells us that it may get stuck. So the app advises you that you should probably choose a different conduit. If what you want to know isn't the maximum fill or the jam ratio, but you want to figure out how many conductors can I really stick in this conduit, how many am I allowed to do, we can click on maximum number of conductors. Here, we don't have any numeric fields. They're all drop-down boxes. So there's no way for you to enter incorrect information. In this particular case, all you have to do is select a conduit size and select a cable size. As you can see, these are cable size in American wear gauge. So if you're not familiar with those sizes, then you would have to do some conversions to and from millimeters squared, but they're in American wear gauge. So let's say we had a 12 AWG cable, which is very common, and we're again using 3/4 inch conduit, which is also very common. We can calculate how many of those can be accommodated. So it tells us that we can fit up to 15 of these according to code in this conductor. And that would mean we can put multiple circuits in this conductor, in this conduit. If we are done or we don't want to do any conduit calculations, but we need to choose some cable, then we can go over to the cable calculations page. Here, we have two types of assessments we can do. We can either select a cable installation type, or we can calculate the length of a circuit, the maximum length of a circuit. So let's look first at the installation type. Electricians and engineers know that when we are selecting cable, we have to be careful about the environment that it's installed in. So for example, is it a dry location? Is it a wet location? Maybe it's a service entrance cable. No matter what it is, we have to select a cable that is specific to the conditions under which it's going to operate. So let's say that we have a cable that we want to have a cable for dry locations. Let's say now we have a maximum temperature. Maybe it's running through a hot space, or it could just be that there's some cable terminations with a particular rating and we want to maintain that rating. So maybe we're looking for a 90 degrees Celsius ambient environment, so we can click that. And then maybe we know what cable size we want. I'm running a small circuit. I want to use 12 gauge cable. I can click select. And here I can see that I have a whole list of possible cables that I can choose from. And it tells me the trade name. So that's the name of the installation usually. The letter type and maximum temperature. What it's used for, the places it's used, and it can also tell me the size range. So what size cable do we have here? If we attempt to do this selection with all of the fields blank, the app won't let us, because at least one criterion must be selected. You have to pick something. Location type or temperature or cable size. But as long as you pick at least one, so let's go now for 150 degrees Celsius. If you pick at least one, you're going to get some results. Whether or not those are results you can use is a different matter, but you're going to get some results. Again, this can be reset. So let's move on to conductor length. So the concept of a maximum cable length is that we want to have all of our equipment perform optimally. That means we want to give the equipment the voltage that it expects. That means that we can't let the cable be as long as we want for a particular size cable. Now, the way that we talk about this in engineering is we say we want to limit the voltage drop to a particular amount. Overall, we want 10%, and if we assume that there's maybe 6% between the utility variation and our entrance cable and feeders. Right now I have it set to default at 4%. We only want 4% voltage drop on this cable. Most of our circuits in Barbados are 115 volts. And let's just say that we have 5 amps in this circuit. But if we click calculate now, we're going to get an error because we can't figure out what the length is without a cable size. So again, let's pick 12 gauge. And for small gauges, we can pick solid or stranded. But most cables are stranded, so let's just click calculate. And when we click calculate, we can see that we get a results table, which provides for us the cable size we used, whether it's stranded or solid, all the other parameters that we have, and also the maximum cable length that we can have for this particular circuit. So in this case, we can go about 68 meters without having too many problems. And because of that, that means that most houses for small loads all the circuits can be cabled with a 12 gauge cable. So that's the end of the calculations. And now we can take a look at the other pages, which are just for your information. So in this particular case, we have some general background, and it talks about the technicalities of what we're doing and the limitations. So for example, it talks about the fact that the calculations for the maximum number of cables only includes THHN, THWN, and THWN2 conductors. Hopefully, in future versions of the app, we'll be able to expand the scope of the app to include other cables and other conduits and so on. Some background on the app and why it might be necessary, and also a little information about the developer. There's a contact form which requires an internet connection as it's implemented with an online PHP form, and it allows entry of first and last name, email address, and comments. The starred entries are required. So if we're going to put information in here, for example, let's say just my name, and I try to click send, it's going to give me an error and tell me, well, these are things that you need to put in. So let's say I put in everything, and let me do a fake email address. And I type some comments. It's going to go ahead and send and save our data here, just in case we want to send something else. And it'll give us a response thanking us for our query. There's also the help, where we have navigation that allows us to go through the different aspects of the help. So looking at conduit fill, for example, or the maximum number of conductors. So let's just look at one. So let's look at the maximum conductor length. And it tells you basically what the functionality is for each of the items in the app. So this particular case, it tells you that that particular button lets us calculate the maximum cable length and it tells us the restrictions. And then we have, for that particular calculation, all of the other information that is either required or provided by the app. So that is, in summary, what my app does. I hope it's been informative and interesting, and hopefully this is something that people will find useful. Thank you.